Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This is the final episode of the speaker tape series. I appreciate everyone for listening. For the past 8 weeks, we've done a speaker that has influenced me in my recovery. Most of these guys I listened to when I first got clean. And sometimes when my recovery was feeling like, I don't know if I want to be here. I'm too young to get clean. I'm not sure if the 12 steps are going to work. You know, I would hear one of these speakers and totally have a perspective change. Totally change how I felt about staying clean. Think that it was possible, and not just think that it was possible, but feel like it was going to be like fun and cool, and like maybe like my life would get better, and it would excite me, you know, listen to these tapes. With that being said, today is Jimmy Jam. Jimmy Jam is one of my favorite speakers. He's also my sponsor. I love hearing him speak. I think when I had like 9 years clean or 10 years clean, I was looking for a new sponsor, and you know, I wanted someone who was spiritual. You know, I've had a sponsor who was like really intellectual, and like I loved my previous sponsor. Like this guy really helped me so much. But I was just looking for someone that like had a lot more like spirituality and a lot of God in his life. My first sponsor used to always, you know, really tell me to pray and really like talked about God a lot. And I kind of miss that, you know? And some people are like too preachy or too like religious or whatever. And some people, I don't know, it's just hard to find a sponsor who's been clean like years. And I was going to meetings, and I heard this guy speak, and there was just something about how clear his message was. It just sounded like secure, you know? He sounded like a secure man. I asked him if he would sponsor me, and at first he kind of said no. So I was like, okay, that's cool. Can I get your number and just call you? And I just kept calling him, and dude, this guy Jimmy's the man. Whenever I have issues going on in my life and I call him, there's just something calming about what he says, and something calming about his spirit. And I don't know, I appreciate him in my life. I love him very much. I go to California a lot for work now, so I do see him a lot more often. And I hope you guys enjoy it. This is Jimmy Jam.
I'm an addict named Jimmy. I want to begin by thanking the giver of the gift. I want to thank God for the gift of recovery and for the opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to Narcotics Anonymous. Thank you to my predecessors. Those people whose hard-won experience sometimes gets overlooked. I have a lot of respect and admiration for anybody who has been of service to this fellowship, either before me or after me, because it is service that helps us come together and keeps this thing alive. It is in the spirit of giving, in the spirit of selflessness, that this is all possible. I want to thank the convention committee for all their selfless service, for all the maybe differences that they had during the convention year, learning to be disagreeable, right? We have to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. And I'm speaking from experience. I've served on our convention committee back home for the last 10 years, and so I want to applaud the convention committee for the wonderful job that they did this weekend. I want to thank my good friend Mark. He's been one of those genuine people that, you know, you can tell is full of sincerity and has a lot of love for Narcotics Anonymous, and just an overall good person. And the people that I've met this weekend, and I want to thank Jim for calling me, and I want to thank Ralph for calling me. They stayed in touch with me, and, you know, gave me the information, and they put up with my, I forgot what time I'm leaving, can you please send, all that stuff, my manageability, they dealt with, and so I'm grateful for them and their patience and their tolerance with me. But most of all, I really want to thank the God of my understanding. It's my first time in 15 years that I've ever been asked to speak on a Sunday morning. And I attribute that to my ongoing persistence and search for God's will in my life. I truly believe that it's brought me to this point that my relationship with God is, because there's a responsibility to set forth on Sunday morning. I'm a big Sunday morning speaker kind of person. I know that when I go to the Sunday morning speaker, that most of the people that are here on Sunday morning are like the true warriors of Narcotics Anonymous. Yeah. The no matter what club is in the building. You understand what I'm saying? I know the guys no matter what club. And I have to understand that I recognize that this is a celebration and not a graduation, and that we leave here. And what happens for me on Sunday mornings, I don't know about anybody else, but there's been such a wonderful weekend, and the expectations were high. I had so much love and hugs, and everybody's here. And then when it ends, I kind of go through this grieving process. I kind of come down. It's kind of like, I don't know how, it's something that comes over me, and I kind of get lonely real quick after the convention's over, and I'm in my room, and I'm packing, and I'm leaving, and I'm going away. And what I usually do to offset that is I put in a speaker CD from the convention, and I get that jolt again, and I go home, and the vibration that happens in the rooms after the convention is amazing, because everybody is on fire and their spirits are filled, and it's important that we keep regenerating that over and over and over and over again in our lives. I know that as a speaker, my job is to maybe plant the seed in somebody's heart that any addict can stop using, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. And it is your responsibility as trusted servants and as home group members and as sponsors to water the seed. It is my responsibility to plant it. It is your responsibility to water it. And that's what my predecessors have done for me. That's what my home group has done for me. That's what my sponsor has done for me. This morning I got up, and the first phone call I made, I called a dear friend of mine in New York. His name is Raymond R., who I love dearly, who has made an impact on my life. And I believe he's one of the significant reasons people that spend in my life, their relationship, of why I'm up here on a Sunday morning. Because I have such an admiration and a love for the relationship that he has with God. And I want what he has. And so I called him this morning, and we sat in prayer, and he prayed for me over the phone. And he has a sacred romance with God. And it's undeniable. And I can't deny it. And so I sat in prayer with him this morning, and then after that I called my sponsor. I spoke to my sponsor for a few minutes, and he informed me that one of my sponsee brothers had passed away. He had been struggling back and forth with active addiction, really not forthcoming with what was going on in his life, and finally God brought him home. And then I called my mother, and I told her I loved her. I told her I'll be home this evening. And my mom, being mom, said, I'll see you tomorrow. We got some things to go over, some stuff to do. Mom, I'm her only son. And my mother's 75 years old, and I'm her only son. And so it's me and mom, and I'm kind of a mama's boy. I'm proud to say I'm a mama's boy. My father passed away when I was 20 years old, and I was in active addiction. And so really, it truly has been me and mom, and you guys truly are my family, because I have half brothers and sisters on my father's side, but truly, you guys are my brothers and sisters. Because I spent so much time, all of my holidays and all my special times in life for the last 15 years have been spent with you. I spent many nights in marathon meetings over the holidays and Thanksgiving and over over different holidays. And so it's been important that I've cultivated relationships with other people. And my clean date is December the 12th, 1995, which tells you that I got clean right before a whole group. There was New Year's Eve, and there was Christmas Eve, and so I had to deal with all these emotions of being clean through these tough times of people that usually celebrate. And the way that society celebrates is they usually make a toast, or the way I used to just get obliviated. I didn't need a holiday to have an excuse to be sideways, you understand? But it was a tough time because it called for the gathering of family and stuff like that. And throughout the years, once that the young child who grew up with a lot of love and a lot of guidance, my mom and dad did the best that they could as I was growing up as a young child to provide for me. My mother was a hard-working woman. My father was a hard-working man. They were just two simple people who provided, who had a child, and my father had the disease of addiction. And in spite of his disease, they did a wonderful job at raising me, regardless of the brokenness. And sometimes I do an injustice to that because I can get up here and talk about all the brokenness and talk about the brokenness and talk about the brokenness and not recognize that all along God had his hand in everything. My mother was born in the Bull Hill of Missouri. She was a little country girl. Used to pick cotton as a child in the fields. My father was born in a little town called Salto, Mexico. He was the oldest of all of his brothers and sisters. He didn't speak English very well, but he was gifted with the gift of music. And my father had a beautiful voice, and he could sing. And he was a very loving father. But he wasn't the kind of father that took me camping, or he took me to the ball game, or supported me in any sports activities. That wasn't my father's makeup. He just wasn't raised that way. And so mom and dad did a very good job of raising me, but during the course of being a child, I was at the expense of our husbands, our wives, and our children. Addiction ravaged my household, and it separated my family at a young age, and my mother had to raise me by herself for a short period of time. And what had happened during that course of that time was when I was growing up, and I was at a young age, and I was easily influenced, and I was looking for love and acceptance. And I seemed to find love and acceptance in a lot of different places. And I started to have an attitude of apathy, as our literature describes it. And I remember as a young kid starting to accept punishment as just a way of life. I was just going to get in trouble. My mother was the kind of mom that disciplined me, and she was loving, but there was times where, if there was a Hot Wheel track laying around and my ass got out of line, pow! That's just what happened. My mom would get me with the Hot Wheel track, or she'd take off her chanclas or whatever she had to do to kind of get my attention, and as a young kid, that worked for a little while, but I remember even being a young boy and walking into the supermarket, and I remember asking my mom, can I have some candy? And she said, no, you cannot. And I remember my little grubby hands grabbing that candy. And, unfortunately for me, I grabbed the caramel, And as you all know, caramel, you can't chew them all that fast. And so I got caught. She said, where'd you get that from? And she marched my little ass back into the supermarket. And I had to make amends. And I said, I'm sorry, right? And I had to pay for the candy. And you would think the lesson had been learned. But that wasn't the end of the road. That was just the beginning. There was something that in my spirit that cried out for something different. And it began with adrenaline and doing things that I knew I shouldn't have been doing. And I realized through my inventory that negative attention is better than no attention at all. Because I was an only child, I sought my mother's attention, and I did things that called for, I'd pull on the phone cord, I'd do something that I knew was wrong, but I did it anyway. And then as I got older, I'm talking about at an age, I'm taking you guys back to like when I was a little kid on Saturday mornings, and I used to eat Count Chocula cereal in front of the TV and watch cartoons, and I would just get a big, that was my favorite day of the week was Saturday mornings. Schoolhouse Rock would be on, I'm Only a Bill sitting on Capitol Hill, and all 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. I used to love Schoolhouse Rock. Sometimes I go on to the, one of those sites, and I just put them in. I just watch them, and I relive my childhood, and I get excited, man. And so as I was growing up, it began. I started to do things where I could tell that I could age myself by telling you that I started watching cartoons, and I started watching American Bandstand. I started watching soap Soul Train. You know, and I started to grow, and the things that I wanted to do were different. My influences began to change. And what happened for me is some group of men, some guys, some family moved in across the street, and some of those people who lived across the street happened to be, and I live in Southern California, where the gang it's very populated by gangs. And what eventually happened is I spent a lot of time across the street. My mother always had words of wisdom for me. She would tell me, you know, be careful, don't go over there, watch out for those guys. And wherever my mother told me not to go, I usually ended up like peeking around the corner to see what she was talking about. Why shouldn't I go over there? And so I ended up being across the street doing a lot of things that involved criminal activity at a young age. You know, it started off very young and innocent. You know, we would do things, I don't know, you see on television, and it's kind of funny. You know, when you think about it now, it may be funny, but if you're the recipient of one of my little pranks, it's not so funny. You know, but as kids, we used to do silly things. You know, like one of the things we used to do is we used to make phone calls. You know, and ask me, is your refrigerator running? You know, shit like that. And then they would say, yes, why? Well, you better go get it. You know, all that kind of stuff, right? Ding dong ditch, you know. And then I would climb up on the church roof, and cars would drive by. We'd throw a rock at the car and wait for that, you know, and we'd have an adrenaline rush to get them to chase us. And I did all kinds of stuff as a young kid that seemed kind of innocent now, but I can tell you, if I was driving along any street and someone threw a rock at my car window, I wouldn't be happy. You know, but looking back on it, you know, it was kind of just being mischievous and being, you know, what boys do and stuff like that. And so I got into some trouble at a young age, and my mother tried to do the best that she could. And so eventually what ended up happening is my mom and dad separated, and because of that, my mother was trying to take care of me on her own, and she had to go to work, and I spent a lot of time at a place called the Boys Club of Hollywood. And at the Boys Club of Hollywood, there was a lot of different people, and you know, I suffer from a thing called comparison. It was one of the most glaring defects of character that I had. And as a young child, when I was 11 years old, I wanted to be 16, and when I was 16, I wanted to be 21. I was never content or happy with where I was at. I could never be comfortable in my own skin. I always wanted more, and it was never enough. You know, and I had that thing inside of me, and I didn't recognize that I had the disease of addiction. I didn't realize that I had never outgrown that, you know, the triangle of self-obsession talks about it best. And I had never outgrown that my wants and needs became demands. And as a young kid, I started to do things, and I started to mimic other people, and I was very easily influenced by the guys at the Boys Club that were older than me, and they, you know, at a young age, and the best way I can describe it is that I had an attraction for guys that had fast conversations with slow-thinking people. Right? I was attracted to the hustlers and the guys that were good in sports and the guys that were slick and you know, they were smooth, and they walked with that little thing, you know, they had that kink, or whatever you want to call it. And at the age of 12 years old, I picked up for the first time. You know, and I want to paint the picture for you. I'm a young kid being raised by his mother. I'm going through puberty. I'm being influenced by things outside of myself. I have a hunger for something different. I just thought I had found it in drugs. And so what eventually happened is somebody handed me a bottle of Southern Comfort, and I used for the first time. And I understand that alcohol is a drug, period. And wet or dry, it'll still get you high. And so that was my first introduction to drugs. I was 12 years old. Suddenly handed me a bottle of Southern Comfort. Southern Comfort turned into Boone's Farm Wine. Boone's Farm Wine turned into Cisco, and that went on and on and on and on. And we are not a substance-driven program. Thank God for Narcotics Anonymous and our predecessors, and for the vision that Jimmy Kinnon had. That to recognize that today that I recover in a fellowship that is a program of inclusion and not exclusion. That I go to meetings with young people, man, that come into this fellowship that never even use the drug alcohol. That they came here using stuff like Special K and Ice and GHB and OxyContin. And there's all these different type of drugs that are ravaging their lives and separating them from their families. And they come in here and they recover in an environment that is inclusive, not exclusive. And I'm grateful for our language, and it's important. And it's important that I had an understanding of that, and I'm grateful for my sponsor that explained to that, and I'm grateful for the H&I do's and don'ts that tells us to explain our language. We are worthy of our own language. And so at 12 years old, I picked up and I used for the first time. And it seemed kind of innocent at first because I recognized through my inventory that I started to use drugs to deal and cope with all my insecurities and my fears at a young age. The first time I ever kissed a girl, the first time I ever slow danced, all of the first, I was always usually leaning on some substance in order to deal with my emotions. I never felt the impact of a heartbreak, puppy love. I never felt that. I never felt the impact of disappointment or betrayal. Not its full impact, because I always leaned on something. I never went to God. I always leaned on something. I never went to God. And I remember as a young child, my mother would open the curtains in the morning. We would be in the living room, and she would open the curtains, and she would say, "Good morning, God." And so God's expression to me was nature. You know, some people say, the great outdoors, good orderly direction. But that was my first experience with God. There was this bird bath on the front yard. And I would see the birds splashing in the water, and I would see the sunshine, I would see the leaves and the greenery and the wind blowing, and that was an expression of God for me as a young child. And so I went on through life dealing with this brokenness, and I didn't know I had a disease called addiction. And my influences were people that had fast conversations for slow-thinking people, and they introduced me to a lot of different things. And in relationships, I never learned to really understand how to communicate or express myself. Although my mom and dad eventually mended their relationship, and my mother took care of my father to his dying day, there was still a brokenness in my family that I had seen. Many nights my mother would take me to a neighbor's house, to a safe haven, because there would be crashing and banging. And my father came home and he was under the influence. Then, usually there was going to be an argument, and my mother wanted to protect me. And if my father started raising his voice or threw something across the room, my mother usually did the right thing and took me to a place where we were safe. And she would pacify the brokenness with things. With things. She would buy me ice cream, or she would buy me a model toy. And as a young child, I didn't recognize that she was just masking the brokenness. And so we replaced the brokenness with things and not God. And so it's no wonder as growing up that I started to look for things outside of myself in order to repair the insecurity and the fear and all the things, the apprehension that kept me from growing as a young boy into a young man. I didn't have a father that really had a good influence on my life, and so I learned from the guys in the neighborhood of what was right, what was wrong, and I was misinformed by a lot of misinformed people. But there was a lot of informed people in my life, like my mother. I just wasn't able to pay attention. For whatever reason, there's a distorted sense of security and familiar pain our literature talks about. And I was driven to the pain and the anguish. There was something exciting about the brokenness of other people and the lifestyle of an addict. They told me when I got here that if the drugs don't get you, the lifestyle will. If the drugs don't get you, the lifestyle will. And it was a lifestyle that I embarked on as a young kid, and I started to do things that I knew I shouldn't be doing in order to cope with those emotions and those feelings that God had placed in my spirit. Guilt and shame, I used drugs in order to cope, and I was in this vicious cycle of using people and using things, and I did things that I were not very proud of. I learned about credit card fraud, and I learned about insurance fraud. I learned about funny money, and I learned about hitting a lick, and I did all these things that I didn't need to do, but I did them anyway. And so what eventually happened for me is that the part of active addiction, because our literature says that active addiction involves more than just the use of drugs. So my recovery must involve more than simple abstinence. And I'm grateful that I have a Narcotics Anonymous clean date, the one that's in the basic text. Total abstinence. That is what they told me 15 years ago. This is a program of total abstinence. We don't use anything. Nothing. And I have a clean date that expresses that. It is my lotto date. It is the date that God has chosen for me. I came in the first time, And I'm grateful. That doesn't say anything about anybody else. It says everything about the program of Narcotics Anonymous, because I didn't do it on my own. I understand that I opened up with gratitude, because gratitude without expression is like wrapping a gift and not giving it. For me to come up here and say that I'm grateful and not express that would just be a crime. But gratitude is best expressed in service, in love, and giving back, and sponsorship, and being a sponsee, and all those things. But getting to that point, man, I went through an emotional upheaval of making bad choices and embarrassing my family. It talks about at the expense of our husbands and our wives and our children. Well, it began at a very young age of me separating me from my father, and my mother being, having to take care of me, being a latchkey kid. Then as I grew up, it started to separate me from my family, because I became ashamed of who I was and what I had become and the things that I was doing. And I didn't show up for a lot of different holidays, and I begrudgingly came to family events, and I showed up, I just wasn't very pleasant. I wasn't a very pleasant person. I wasn't happy on the inside. I was broken. And I remember using drugs. It got to a point where I started using drugs against my will. And I can tell you, I want to get in and out of it, because you know what, I understand a lot of times it's important to share with you who I am and to share my experience, strength, and hope, But a lot of times we waste a lot of time talking about how powerful the disease of addiction is, and not enough time on how powerful the relationship with God can be, or the 12 steps can be. But the obsession and the compulsion and the complete and total self-centeredness ravaged my life. And I remember being obsessed and thinking about a particular drug, and it had the ability to change the way that I feel physically, because I would obsess on something, and I remember being, young kid, and I would always have a middleman, and when I was younger, and I told this guy, can you go get me this, and boom, and I gave him the money. He would go around the corner, and I'd be sitting there in the car waiting, because the dope man didn't want nobody to bring traffic to his house. So you had to sit and you had to wait. And as soon as I saw him come back around the corner and he came into my view, all of a sudden my palms got sweaty, and all of a sudden my stomach started to gurgle, and I had to have a bowel movement. And I'm talking about something that's so powerful that I didn't even use yet. And it's changed the way that I felt physically. Then as soon as I got that particular drug in my hand and I used, I thought I was just going to use for a particular time or just for a particular amount. I was under a power much greater than myself called addiction. And the compulsion began. And I went all night long, and the self-centeredness of it all is I thought I could stop whenever I wanted. And I thought that I wasn't hurting anybody but myself, and I didn't recognize that I was embarrassing my mother, and I was putting shame in between me and my relationship with God. I didn't understand that I was getting isolated more and more and more. And I got to a place, man, I got to tell you, right before I got clean, that, I was 155 pounds, and I was coughing up that green and yellow liver bile. And I had blood coming out of every orifice of my body, and I had diarrhea, and I had the shakes real bad, and I had suicidal thoughts, and I had insomnia, I had anxiety attacks and panic attacks. It was an overwhelming sense of doom, and I had nowhere else to go. God got my attention to the point where I cried out to Him from a place that I had never cried out to Him before. The best way that I could describe how I felt, a man named Sam Cooke said it best. It was too hard living, but I was afraid to die. A change is going to come. And I cried out to God, and that's why I began this morning by thanking God, because I understand that this is a God-given program. And I'm assured of who I cried out to. I didn't say, please, can the treatment center, can you please help me? I didn't cry out for the Los Angeles Police Department to help me. I didn't cry out for a social outreach program to help me. I said, God. I'm clear about that. And in all fairness, I want to read to you what was written for me. This here is the full fruit of the labor of love which lives in the harvest. And it always comes in its right season. This is the labor of love that was given to me. This is my divine inheritance. It's the 12 steps and the 12 traditions of Narcotics Anonymous. And I accept it humbly and gratefully. And I appreciate what my predecessors have done for me. And it talks about in our second step in the step working God, and this was very important for me because it was one of the attractions of Narcotics Anonymous to me. And it was something that was written It says there is nothing, absolutely nothing in any program that requires a member to be religious. The idea that anyone may join us regardless of religion or lack of religion is fiercely defended by our fellowship. Our members strive to be inclusive in this regard and do not tolerate anything that compromises the unconditional right of all addicts to develop their own individual understanding of a power greater than themselves. This is a spiritual, not religious program. And so I don't have the right to come up here and shove God down your throat by any particular means or someplace that I go to worship. It's not that I'm not grateful for those things, and it's not that our literature doesn't ask us to pursue those things. For Narcotics Anonymous, I have to ask myself certain things. Is what I'm going to share going to unify us or divide us? And we are a worldwide fellowship. And that's why we do not pray out in the Lord's Prayer. I don't think the Lord's Prayer would go over too well in Iran or Thailand or many of the places that our members have gone out to carry the message. And so we need to be a program of inclusion and not exclusion. And so I'm grateful for the neutrality and for the freedom that I've been given here. But it's important. It is important to be honest about my belief.
Hey, now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. It can be tough to train your brain to stay in problem-solving mode when faced with a challenge in life. But when you learn to find your own solutions, there's no better feeling. A therapist can help you become a better problem solver, making it easier to accomplish your goals, no matter how big or small. What can someone get from trying therapy? Unload stress, emotional healing, help with anxiety and depression, and much more. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, accessible, affordable, and entirely online. Get matched with a therapist after filling out a brief survey and switch therapists at any time. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/exit today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/exit.
And so I went on and I begged God for help, and God said Narcotics Anonymous. And at 7 days clean, I had a seizure from the DTs, and that's why I said that alcohol is a drug, because I had my own experience. No one had to tell me that alcohol was a drug. It almost killed me. And I got here broken, and I got here desperate, and I got here dying. Gift of desperation, G-O-D. And I raised my hand. I called my friend Josh, and I said, listen, man, I'm scared. I don't want to die like this. Can you please help me? And he had 7 years clean in the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And he walked me into a little meeting on the corner of Fountain, Fairfax, in the greater Hollywood area of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm a proud member of the Monday Night Madness home group in the greater Hollywood area in the Southern California region. My home group saved my life on a continuous basis. We meet every Monday night. It's one of the most exciting things that I do every week is I go to my home group at 7:45 p.m. I get there early, right? My home group is comprised of 25 voting home group members. There's 150 people every Monday night. We have noisemakers. We have a bubble machine. We have a horn. We do a hug line. We do all kinds of crazy stuff under the umbrella of group autonomy, right? We celebrate recovery, and it's attractive to most newcomers. And what happens is some people come and either love my home group or you can't stand it. And that's why in our region, there are many different choices. There's another meeting that I have a lot of respect and admiration for. My good friend Tony D is a home group member there. He's been clean for 35 plus years. It's called the Topanga Tranquil meeting, and they meet on Monday nights. And so you have Hollywood, Monday Night Madness, West End of the Valley, Topanga Tranquil. Pick your poison. Right? And so I'm excited to show up at my home group, and I'm grateful for the members there. And some of my home group members came to Nebraska a couple of years ago. My good friend Yo Steve, and if you ever met Yo Steve, you can't miss him, right? So He's one of my home group members, and he's one of my predecessors. He's one of the men that just took to me and showed me how to do this thing. And he's always made recovery very exciting. And he's taken a lot of risk in Narcotics Anonymous. And some people give him a bad rap, but I love him because he's been good to me. And I don't take on other people's resentments because I give myself permission to have my own experience with people. I am not swayed or motivated by other people's morals or values anymore. I will not bend or bow to the morals of other people. I have my own belief system. And the relationship that I have with God in these steps will take me to be the man that God wants me to be. And sometimes that's not going to be always in favor of other people or the fellowship of what people think I should do or not do. I'm grateful for the members who have taken the 12 steps into their own life and that have given me the opportunity and met me with my defects of character with love and tolerance and patience. Thank God for the members that are working a program of Narcotics Anonymous that don't judge or moralize, but sit back and offer empathy and understanding. And I understand that we are diverse within our fellowship, and I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about we all suffer a degree of sickness and rate of recovery. Thank God we're not all sick on the same day. And then I get an opportunity to listen. When I came in here, my friend Charlie from Detroit said one of the most profound things I ever heard in Narcotics Anonymous. He said the greatest crime ever committed by man is to steal from oneself and not realize anything is missing. Wow. To be offered the 12 steps and to not take advantage of this gift that God has given me. To not pay attention when I come into meetings. To take it for granted that tomorrow is offered. To not stay in the moment. The moment is the gift, man. That's why we call it the present. And it's very hard for me sometimes to stay in the moment. And so I'm grateful that I started on this journey. I walked in that little room on the corner of Fountain and Fairfax amongst these group of men and women who the chairs were clattering in the hardwood floor, and it was in this little church, and they had pews, and that's where my recovery began. And I remember raising my hand at about 30 days clean because they needed a literature person at this group and nobody was stepping up to the plate. And it was a noontime meeting. See, I'm a noontime meeting guy. I don't know about you guys, but my heart is in the noontime meeting. My home group meets at night, but I still serve at the noon meeting because that's where the newcomers are. Those men and women saved my life, and I have a debt that I can never repay. And so I stay, and I'm of service, and I've had a service position in Narcotics Anonymous ever since I've had 30 days clean. And it's not because I'm wonderful. It's because I'm self-centered. It truly is. God has given me a platform, a way out, to not be so self-obsessed because I'm an only child. I came to you guys with issues. I have entitlement issues. I'm an only child. I'm self-centered. I'm greedy. I don't play well with others sometimes unless there's a motive. I know these things about me because the inventory has revealed them to me because I asked for a relationship with God, and I turned my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions over to Him. And He revealed to me where the brokenness was. And I shared with my sponsor, and I cultivated a relationship with the steps that is undeniable. And it expressed itself in the way that we live. And I'm grateful that you guys were the power of example, that you showed me the proper way to live. And I would ask God, take my will in my life, guide me in my recovery, show me how to live. Well, you showed me how to live through your lives. And you were the power of example. And some of you even cultivated a relationship with God that was so deep that you eventually became the examples of the power. And that was deep for me. How other people affected me, how they lived their lives, what they said, how they treated their children. And the journey of recovery has been a wonderful journey. It has been anything less than exciting. Like, I mean, living and enjoying life. When I got here, I went through all those first clean. I remember going to my first Narcotics Anonymous dance clean. I was uncomfortable. I felt like that little kid in junior high school that had that jukebox playing, Nights in White Satin. And you had to ask, I heard somebody, I think it was Gary, who was mentioning about asking the girl to dance and became his wife. Well, that wasn't my story. The first young lady I asked to dance in Narcotics Anonymous said no too. And I took that long walk of shame across the room, and it brought back feelings of when that little girl in junior high school told me no. And I turned back around and watched her on the dance floor with somebody else. And I never forget that feeling that we carry that with us a long time. And I recognize where the control came from. Because I wasn't raised that way, but in every relationship that I entered into, I became this very insecure, controlling young man. I even became physical in some of the relationships that I'm not proud of being that kind of a man, or less of a man. But that's exactly what the disease had done to me. I didn't understand about being powerlessness. I had no idea about any of those things. I didn't learn that at home. Although my father was violent to a certain degree, I never saw him put his hands on my mother. He would raise his voice, he would throw things, and my mother would take me to some place that was safe. But I learned that from the guys in the neighborhood. It just seemed to be the common theme. And so I came to you guys with a lot of issues, and I was broken. And I asked this man to sponsor me. I remember the first man I asked to sponsor me, he said no, and they told me to be vigilant about my recovery, man, to safeguard this thing. I needed somebody to guide me, and you know what? If you didn't have a sponsor, you had a fool for a sponsor. So I asked this man to sponsor me. He said, I want you to call me every day for 30 days, and if you can do that, at the end of 30 days, you have yourself a sponsor. And he made requirements of me. He made me go to every meeting, get phone numbers from people that had clean time. And he told me you needed to get a service position. And I want you to make sure that you have the basic text and it works how and why. And I want you to read the just for the day every day. And he would share things with me that weren't so pleasant. He wasn't so concerned about my feelings as he was about my well-being. He told me things like, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. He probably wants you to listen twice as much as you talk. He told me that Narcotics Anonymous was $1 million program. They were going to shove it up my ass a nickel at a time. And that's the way he talked to me, and my spirit invited that because I needed some tough love, and I wasn't one of those people that said, please don't talk to me that way, because I remember from where I came from, and the dope man wasn't so kind. Because I would come to his house, he would say, please don't come here after midnight. Don't bring traffic to my house after midnight, and I would be high at midnight. And he would talk bad to me. He wasn't very kind. He wasn't like, you know what, Jimmy, I'd appreciate it if you don't come here. He was like, what the fuck did I tell you? You know, pardon my language. But that's how he talked to me. Sometimes you have to describe things just as they are. And he would talk to me like that. And so I'm not so concerned about you guys hurting my feelings. I know that I had to grow thick skin around here because it's not what you call me that's important, it's what I answer to. And what I answer to can serve me if I'm willing to look at it constructively and not get so defensive and allow God to work in my life and recognize that some of you, even though your motive may be twisted, that it can best serve me, that sometimes I've done things and we are each other's eyes and ears around here. And that sometimes the most loving thing I can do for somebody is to tell them the truth, regardless if it's going to hurt their feelings. I'd rather hurt your feelings than to watch you die. So sometimes the gifts in recovery are bitter and painful. And we don't recognize that these things, the gifts come as a result of pain because it's a power greater than ourselves that we seek if we get in enough pain. And so I asked this man to sponsor me, and he guided me through the 12 steps and the 12 traditions of Narcotics Anonymous, and he took me on this journey. And I found myself with a lot of questions. And today I still have more questions than I have answers. I never want to be one of those people that thinks they have all the answers. I was taught that humility is still having questions. Green things grow, right things rot. I'm still available and visible as the 12th step asked me to be. 15 years clean, I'm visible and available. I have a home group. I have a relationship with God. I sponsor 10 men. I have a commitment at noontime. I'm a good son. I'm a pretty good sponsee. I could be a better sponsor. And I say that with humility because I sponsor a lot of men, and some of them require a lot of attention, and sometimes, I got my hands full. And that's why it was important for me to get a support group and not a support person. Not put the burden solely on my sponsor. Because my sponsor is a human being, and he has just as much a disease of addiction as I do. And I love my sponsor. I got a 2-for-1. My sponsor, I've had 2 sponsors in the 15 years that I've been clean, but I have a sponsor now. He's been married to the same woman for the last 25 years. She has 35 plus years clean. My sponsor's got 26 years clean. She had 10 years clean when they met, and he had 9 months, so much for leaving the newcomer alone, right? And they've been together, and he has something that I want. And I'm grateful for my sponsor. I'm grateful for the love. I'm grateful for the people in Narcotics Anonymous that have tolerated me throughout the years. And I'm one of those people that's been involved in service. And I'm very opinionated. I'm very passionate. And sometimes I can be self-righteous. And sometimes I can be very arrogant. And sometimes I have to come back and make amends. But I know one thing's for sure, that I love this fellowship. And that I am in debt. And I owe amends to many people. I owe amends to my mother because it was my mother's heart that I broke most of all. And I stole things from my mother that you cannot replace. I took things from her like serenity and pride. That's why I called her this morning. I called the 3 most important people in my life. I called my friend Raymond, I called my sponsor, and I called my mother. Valentine's Day was a few weeks ago. I don't have a significant other, and it's kind of a humorous thing, relationships for me, right? Valentine's Day was a few weeks ago, and I looked at this flyer that they had on the table, and it was an upcoming Valentine's Day event, and they, couples. If you went to the dance and you were a couple, it was $10. But if you were single, it was $7, right? I said, ain't that up there? I'm getting punished for being lonely. But I'm grateful because every relationship that I've entered into, whether it's been somebody in the fellowship or not, most of them have been women in the fellowship because this is where my heart is. This is where I socialize. And I got to tell you that it is challenging to be in a relationship in Narcotics Anonymous in full view of an entire fellowship, worldwide fellowship. Right? And I got to tell you, when you start dating somebody in Narcotics Anonymous, you're not just dating them, you're dating them, their sponsor, sponsee sisters. Everybody got an opinion. And it's very, walking around, did she tell her? They're talking about me, I'm self-centered as it is. I heard a guy once say he was so self-centered, he went to the football game, when he got in the huddle, he swore they was talking about him. And that's how I came in here, very self-centered, very self-absorbed, right? And so I think you were talking about me. So, relationships have been a challenge, but they've been my greatest teacher. They've introduced me to the brokenness of where I needed to work on, because immediately after a few weeks of being in a relationship with somebody that I really care about, the insecurity, fear, the control comes up, and I have to greet those things with the principles that I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous. Just because you think it don't mean you need to say it. And thank God I have the ability to let other people be wrong. See, when I first got here, I couldn't let you be wrong. And if you were wrong and I knew it, I reminded you that you were wrong. I didn't know how to forgive and forgive the debt, completely let it go. I still learn about forgiveness. I asked my friend Raymond, I said, how do you deal, how does that work? He said, true forgiveness means you forgive the debt, whether it's owed or not. And that was deep for me. That was deep for me because I've had conflict with some of my brothers and sisters in Narcotics Anonymous. And I thought there was something wrong with me. And I always know that the literature is the truth. Even the literature says that we have seen 2 members who don't normally get along set aside their differences to work together for the newcomer. That means that we're all not going to get along. And I think that's important because my sponsor has been in this relationship for so many years, and I asked him about that. He said it's important. He said if you're in a relationship and people aren't arguing, that means that somebody's voices are being heard. That usually means that somebody's being walked on. And so I've had to learn to speak up for myself, and I've had to learn to disagree without being disagreeable. And I've had to learn certain things, and I had to recall on on some of the jewels that my predecessors had shared with me. My dear friend Beaver Lawrence used to say, anybody can catch, but can you hold? He would say it with conviction. And how he would share with me about different experiences that he had. And he died on this, and he died keeping the promise in Narcotics Anonymous. He was just shy walking across the stage for graduate school, for law school. He was 68 years old when he passed away, 29 years clean. Beautiful man. Impacted my life. Told me that my greatest strength is my admission of my weakness. See, a real man will bring his weaknesses to God because he understands where the power is. I It's not a kind thing I can do about any defect of character that I have or any shortcoming that may express itself in my life. I need to bring those things to him. I need to cultivate the relationship with him. And the 7th step it talks about, we humbly ask him. My friend Raymond has made that very clear to me. He's expressed that to me. That's why I called him this morning. He said the most important word in the 7th step is him. And if you don't have a relationship with him, then who are you humbly going to ask to remove your shortcomings? The group? Your sponsor? Your home group? They don't have the power. I must go to him. And so I've been doing that. I've been taking my weaknesses and my brokenness to God. The things that I'm challenged with. I think the biggest thing that's been standing in my way of my relationship with God is lust. It is something that's bigger than me, and sometimes I get caught up, and I don't know how to explain it to anybody, but other than the fact that sometimes I do things that I'm not so proud of, even with clean time. Things that bring shame and guilt into my spirit because I act on selfishness. And, I don't mind being single. I'm good at being single because I've accepted God's will in my life, and it says I can be happy and content with or without a partner. But sometimes I'm okay with just Mrs. Right Now. Do you know the last name of the last person you slept with? That's an important thing to know. There's been times that I remember going, I don't even know her last name. How much thought did I really put into this? How much effort did I really make? Do I know her favorite color? Do I know what she likes to eat? Just when they talked about rationalization, I could fall back on the principle of there's no robbery and a fair exchange. But then again, do I want more for myself? Raymond says I should look for a woman who loves God more than she's going to love me. And if you can find a woman that loves God more than she's going to love you, you're not going to have to worry about insecurity or fear or her cheating on you. Because if she has a relationship with God, she will be a woman of integrity. And I'm still learning. I'm still young at this in my mindset. And that's why I came here this morning for a quest to cultivate my relationship with my higher power and to ask God for help because it's a weakness of mine that I understand. And there has to be an acknowledgement before there can be help. And I have to admit that there's a problem before there can be help. And then I need to allow other people to help me. And I need to lean on the experience of the fellowship and ask other people, please, can you express to me what was your experience? Not from a place of judgment or don't moralize with me, but tell me what your experience was. And so I have a deep place in my heart, a deep compassion, a deep place of empathy for anybody that's ever been in a relationship that has been just totally, completely unmanageable. Because I've been through several of those clean. With the inability to let go, they said, man, if you don't let go, you're going to get dragged. And I have to look for God in my life. In situations, someone said, if you want to find God, look in front of you and thank God. Look behind you. Look in front of you and trust God. Look behind you and thank God. Look around you and serve God. Look inside you and you will find God. And I had to cultivate that. If I'm moving forward, I need to trust God's will in my life. If I look behind me, I need to thank Him for all the times that He's taken me through. If I look around me, my best position, the highest aspiration of the human heart is to be of service to others. And if I look inside me, if I take the steps that go inward, I will find God. I just had to sort through the confusion and the contradiction in my life. I had to make amends. I had to pray. I'm here as a result of prayer. This morning I got on my hands and knees in the shower and I asked God for willingness. I asked Him for courage. I asked Him for wisdom. I asked Him for knowledge and I asked Him for power. The power to carry His will out. What is God's will? They express it in the 11th step. It works how and why? To be happy with or without. Content, money, no money. Joy and beauty in my surroundings. Step working guide. talks about God's will and what God's will is not. It says this: it takes a large amount of open-mindedness to begin to understand God's will for us. Many of us find it easier to identify what is not God's will for us rather than what is. This is absolutely fine. In fact, this is a great starting point that can lead us to a more specific knowledge of God's will for us. It says, first of all, and obviously, it is not God's will for us to relapse. We can extend this simple fact to conclude that acting in ways that might lead to relapse are also not God's will for us. So I have to ask myself, what am I doing? Is this something that they told me that, you know what, relapse is never an accident. It can and does happen. And that those who come in and out of the program, and they keep coming in and out, there's something so special about them that God is not done with them yet. He has something, a calling on their life. And it's something that they need to do. But sometimes we don't always listen to what God has for us. And so I applaud my friends and many people. It hasn't been my experience. Relapse has not been my experience, a physical relapse to drugs, but I've had definitely a lot of spiritual and emotional lapses over the last 15 years that have brought shame and guilt and self-loathing into my spirit. And I've had to open myself up to my sponsor and tell him the truth and talk. And sometimes I get enough courage to bring it to the group, and I can share with you about the embarrassing things that I went through, and I get an opportunity to share with others, and I give other people permission to talk about what's embarrassing and shameful to them. And what has happened for me, man, is I've aligned myself with the Spirit of God, and I try to lean towards people who are living and enjoying life without the use of drugs. I try to abandon self-loathing and self-righteousness and arrogance. And I've traded those things in for prosperity and abundance and love. And I've tried to step into my greatness and allow other people to shine by doing what is right. And our literature says that we emphasize our assets. We don't have to be embarrassed about the fine things in life that we come to partake in. As a matter of fact, we need to give people permission to do the same thing. Thank God for you people that came and shared your successes with me. Thank God that you came in here and you had enough humility. I'm telling you, humility. Humility is being right-sized. It means you don't play yourself. You don't downplay your assets. Matter of fact, you let them shine. Share with me your successes. Tell me about going back to school. Share with me about getting your first apartment. Talk about getting your driver's license. Talk about getting your children back. I met a young lady. I spoke in Columbus, Ohio a number of years ago, and I met a beautiful young lady named Stephanie. Stephanie and I began a relationship, and she was she lived in Virginia, and I lived in Los Angeles, and so I traveled back and forth, and she came to visit me one time, and then we got in the car, and I took her to Las Vegas, and we drove to Baltimore, and we drove to New York, and she had a beautiful young son named Caden. He was 3 years old, and he had bright blue eyes and dark hair, and his father was in the military, and so, you know, he was a mama's boy just like me. Stephanie and I were in this long-term this long-distance relationship, and eventually what happened is the relationship ended, and there wasn't anything. It was overwhelming. There was no yelling or no arguing. It just didn't work out. There just didn't seem to be enough time or enough passion between the two of us, and people have a right to change their mind. And I remember Stephanie called me a few years ago, right before Valentine's Day. And she had told me that she had relapsed, and she was scared, and she had to go to work the next day, and she didn't know what to do. And I remember hearing her voice, and I talked to her for about an hour, and I told her, you need to get to a meeting. You need to forget about what people are going to say about you or what you think they're going to say about you. Just go and take that white chip, that you can start over. And I hung the phone up, and that was the last time I ever heard from Stephanie. It was not shortly after that I received the phone call that she had overdosed from a heroin overdose. She had sent her son off to be with his father after he came back from a tour of duty in Iraq. And she sent him away for 2 weeks, and he left on a Friday, and Monday morning they found her dead, all alone in her house. And I say that to say this, that a mother's love for her child is powerful, but the disease of addiction is just that much more powerful. And it's not that people don't love their children. I just recognize how powerful the disease is. And I also have to find something that is much greater than that, because the disease of addiction is powerful, but so is recovery. And recovery in my relationship with God is more powerful than gossip. It's more powerful than people trying to moralize and judge with each other. It's more powerful than anything that I can particularly try to do to myself. If I take it to God, He will make it right. I get an opportunity to stay clean. If I stay clean, then I'm winning. If I use, I lose. For us to use is to die in more ways than one. And I recognize when I first came in, I tell a couple little things, and
This is a giant eyesore.
All you have to do is point.
Nice!
Call 1-800-GOT-JUNK and we'll be at your house within 90 minutes.
We come at your convenience.
When you want junk to disappear, all you have to do is point.
and then we'll get out of here. I remember I came to my first meeting and it was like, I felt very small and very insignificant as a newcomer, because it was such a big fellowship and it was all these people, you know, and I got clean in a big city, and I got clean in the birthplace of Narcotics Anonymous, and I felt very insignificant. I was frightened, I was broken, and I was all alone. And it's like a raindrop seems very small and insignificant, one little drop of rain, but when that raindrop falls into the ocean, it becomes part of something much greater than itself. Just like when the addict comes into a meeting and raises his hand and makes an admission, because you have to make an admission, because membership is not automatic when a person walks in the door. And so when I made that admission and I raised my hand, I became part of something much greater than myself. And 2 weeks ago, I was in South Carolina, and I've told this story before, and I'll tell it again. I was in South Carolina, and we were standing on the ocean out there at Hilton Head. And I was with a bunch of young people in recovery, and we're walking around, and there was these starfish on the ocean. They were on the sand, right? And I said, wow, I remember telling this story a number of years ago. And there was a story about this man who went on vacation, and he came along the beach, and every morning he would get up and he would jog along the beach, and he would look down the beach, and there'd be this other young man way down the way. And every morning the tide would pull back, and there would be thousands and thousands and thousands of starfish laid along the beach. And every morning this guy would observe this other man grabbing these starfish and throwing them into the ocean. And there was hundreds of thousands of them. And every morning he would do the same thing, and every day he was compelled to do the same thing. And one day he walked up to the man and he said to him, what is it that you're doing out here? I don't understand. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of starfish along the beach. You'll never be able to save all of them. So what does it matter? And the guy reached down and pulled up a starfish, and he says, to this starfish it matters, and he threw him into the ocean. And I think that's what we do here in Narcotics Anonymous, is that we carry the message. And we're not responsible for who it lands upon. But we have a responsibility to carry the message. We have a responsibility to take the 12 steps and the 12 traditions into our lives and serve from a place of acceptance and love. Not to serve from a place of self-righteousness and arrogance. If I'm doing service without taking the steps, then I'm doing a disservice. If I don't understand about group conscience, what's good for the group is good. You know, we're never in competition with each other. Motive, doing the right thing for the right reason. All of that stuff it's imperative that I understand it if I'm willing to be a useful vessel that God is going to use to continue to serve in this fellowship. My friend Randy told this story a few weeks ago in my home group, and I asked him permission. I said, Randy, can I tell that story? Because it impacted me. It affected me. And he said, Jimmy, you know everything that we hear here doesn't belong to us. Share it with other people. And he told the story about this guy, right? He said, Jimmy, put your own little twist on it, so I'm going to put my little twist on it. He told the story about this guy who used to build tunnels. And he was a tunnel digger. And he was out there digging into the side of the mountain. He was digging, and he was digging, and he was digging, and he was wishing that he wasn't a tunnel digger. And he's, man, the king came down, and he was looking, and he was checking out the work that was being done. And he said, God, I wish I was the king. And poof, he became the king. And he sat there with his robe and his big robe and all the gear, and it was a hot sunny day, and then he stood there as the king, and he said it feels good to be the king, and all of a sudden he felt the heat, and he felt the heat on his neck, and he said it sure is hot. He says, you know what? I don't want to be the king. The sun is powerful. I want to be like the sun. The sun is more powerful than the king. And he said, God, I want to be the sun, and poof, he became the sun. And he began to shine his light and his rays, and he began to nourish and and he began to breathe life, and he said, wow, it feels good to be the sun. And then one day a cloud came and blocked the sunlight. He said, wow, God, the cloud is more powerful than the sun. I don't want to be the sun, I want to be the cloud. And poof, he became the cloud. And the cloud began to rumble, and it began to shower storms, and it began to water the earth. And he said, it feels good to be the cloud. And then one day the wind came along. It started to blow the cloud away. And he said, God, I don't want to be the cloud anymore, I want to be the wind. Poof, God made him the wind, and he became the wind, and he started swirling around, and he started breathing life into people, and he started going through the town, and he came, and he was just rolling around, and boom, he came up against the mountain. And he couldn't go anywhere. He said, God, the mountain is more powerful than the wind. I want to be the mountain. Poof, he became the mountain. And he stood there in all his majesty, the mountain, steadfast, sturdy, strong, powerful. And along came a tunnel digger. And he said, God, I want to be a tunnel digger. The moral to this story is the true value is in being ourselves. And that we all have a message to carry. And that everybody in this room has a story to tell. And it is your story that is your gift to us, and it is your gift to God. And it is your responsibility to carry the message to the addict who still suffers. And that addict may be the person next to you, and maybe the person that still has to come. And the little meeting in our secretary on Wednesdays, we have put a chair in the middle of the room, and it's significant because that chair represents the addict who has yet to come, keeping our primary purpose and focus, and also remembering those addicts who have come and gone, who have touched our lives, the men and women, the shoulders who I stand upon. My friend Carmelita, my friend Beaver, my friend John. There were so many people that have touched my life. My good friend Khalees. These people, man, throughout the years that have loved me. Freddie Aquino, Bob Stubbe. These people that have showed me, man, they died, and they all died keeping the promise. They all died keeping the promise. Freedom is what we're trying to attain. Close encounters of the clean kind. Boy, I text my friends, they got a kick out of that, boy. You guys need the theme music. Dun, 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 dun. That would be hot. Come on, man. Step it up, guys. Let's do it. I hope that I shared something this morning that touched somebody's spirit. I wanted to say this: if you're in this room and you're thinking about using, I'd rather you be in this room thinking about using rather than to be out there using, wishing you were here with us. Thank you.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.